All right. So, welcome to Charles's Weekly Parti. And I came up with the name for it by my involvement in architecture. So, in architecture, we have this thing called a parti. If you type it into Microsoft Word or some other word processing program, you'll find out pretty quickly that it doesn't really show as a dictionary word, which is kind of interesting because really it isn't in most people's dictionaries. It's in an architect's dictionary. So it's not a word that most people are likely to use. You hear party, you're thinking, oh, party. Someone's having a lot of fun. They're going and maybe it's a block party. They just think you're saying it as a funny accent, parti. No, it is an architecture term. And really what a parti is taking an idea and showing the abstract of it. So you're not going and saying, oh, when you start something out, it's not just oh, you're going and as an architecture, you don't just start with with floor plans. That's not the way it works. Floor plans are something you see as one of the deliverables of an architecture project, but it's not actually it's not actually the first thing that happens. The first thing that generally happens, or the first sort of product for that particular site, ends up being a parti to show what you, as the architect, really want to see. And realistically speaking, that's where something like a parti ends up being pretty useful, because it is the most basic way of showing an abstraction of what you want to have happen on that site. Right? There's no other way to really put it. So, my weekly parti is really not as much of it's not I'm making a drawing every week. No. I have a list of things that really sort of describes my feelings, my thoughts for the week. And the abstraction of that is really a parti. So, this is really a verbal parti of me for the week. And I really like the idea of being able to combine two of my favorite things. I like architecture and I like technology, and I think both of them are important to my parti. And occasionally food. Can't forget about the food part. Food is very, very delicious, very interesting. Not necessarily something I talk about all the time, but occasionally I can't help myself. I have to talk about the food, because there are some special foods that need to be talked about. So, over the past few weeks, I've been working on something in Germany called a thermal bath. And this is our latest project for architecture, trying to figure out how best to put a thermal bath onto a site. And thinking about it, we were introduced to something designed in the 1990s by Peter Zumthor that was an extension to a hotel to give it thermal bath facilities. And this is located in Switzerland, and it was built as an addition onto a hotel. So, right away it's a chance to add a big attraction to a hotel. If you add something to a hotel, it needs to be important, because if you just add something to a hotel and it doesn't bring any people in, it isn't really a added perk. Many of us have gone to a hotel, we've had like list of 12 perks and we've used 3 of them. We've used the 3 of them that are most important to us. So when you add an amenity, you need to make sure that when you're adding it, it can't detract from it. It can't be something that says, oh, you're charging me extra for this, but it isn't really worth it. It's supposed to be if you do it right, an amenity will go and bring extra people in. It's going to be something that really gets other people happy. They want to stay there. And when you do it right, that gives you the feeling of, do I have to leave already? I'd really like to stay another day just because of this amenity. Or maybe I don't need to go out and sightsee in Switzerland today because the thermal baths are so nice. Which really, I think, is what it is. And having seen pictures and floor plans and parties and all of the drawings for it, I'm looking at it. I could go out to Switzerland just to look at that. If I had the funding, vacation time, and whatnot, could happily go to Switzerland just to visit the thermal baths. Now, part of that is the sort of architect in me saying, okay, I like this, I want to see this, it looks amazing, but there's another part of me that says this is just beautiful. I want to go there for the relaxing feel that it has. It has a natural feel, it has a timeless feel. And part of that has to do with Peter Zumthor not really wanting to have clocks in there. I think that ended up being one of the sort of issues that was encountered later on, because he wanted the facility to have a timeless feel, which, realistically speaking, it does. If you do it right, we all know the saying, time flies when you're having fun. And when you're waiting in line at the DMV, you can watch the seconds go by. You're counting the seconds. You're waiting for those seconds to go by. But in this particular case, it's not a matter of oh, how much time went by. When you do it right like that, you don't care what time it is. World could be ending around you and you're just relaxed. So, and I think that natural and timeless feel really helps it out. Some people do and don't like exploring caves. I've gone on some cave explorations before. Sort of like the nice, cool feel to them, although having to go and sandwich myself into a couple of areas wasn't necessarily the most entertaining. It was rather interesting, I think. But I think a engineered or a designed cave can also be very nice if you do it right with the right materials. And I think the Therme Vals here really go and demonstrate that. It's timeless, as I've said before, but it also has a very strong natural feel. You have, if I'm remembering correctly, local quartzite that was used layered in a pattern, but using a very specific pattern to look like it was naturally there. And looking at it, it doesn't look like someone went and actually layered all of the things up. It looks like someone hollowed the areas around it out. It looks like the walls were there, but we just took out, or whoever was building it took out the central areas. So I think that's really a nice thing about it. But in addition to the fact that you have just a great choice of materials, a great location, and for it, there's a specific piece for the circulation that was referred to as the meander in it. And when they were talking about it, or when I was reading about it, the author who was writing about the particular meander had pointed out that it had a way of seamlessly connecting everything, which really speaks out to how well it was designed. Because if you have a list of rooms that need to be in a place, you can have things that work, you can have things that don't work. Like for a house, you'd expect to have a kitchen, a living room, family room, dining room, bedrooms, bathrooms, or mudroom. But there are obvious connections that do and don't get made. So oftentimes you'll see the kitchen is very close to the dining room. And that may not be something that gets thought about right away, but when you're designing a building, you need to think about how does each item, each feature of a facility interact with the others? How do they need to interact? So, in most homes, the kitchen and the dining room are adjacent or sometimes even connected. So if you have an open sort of floor plan, you'll have the kitchen, the dining room, the living room connected, and that's for a reason. Having the kitchen and the dining room connected gives you the ability to have a spot where you don't have to go and walk all the way across the house to bring food to the dining room. And think about it. If you're carrying a very hot tray, you don't want to have to go and walk from one end of that house to the other end. You want to walk as minimal distance to make sure that when things really getting hot, you can have it put down and have your hands off it. Because heaven knows if it gets too hot while you're actually carrying it, there's a point where your body just says, I don't want to hold this anymore, and your brain will say you're causing harm, and it will let go of it. You're holding on to something that's hurting me, I'm making you let go of it. And then instead of eating the casserole, you're cleaning the casserole off the hallway. And similar to the dining room and the living room. The dining room is where you eat. Once you've finished eating, once one person's finished eating, they usually sit at a table for a little bit. Assuming 3 or 4 or 6 people here, right? So one person finishes, they might sit around, continue conversing and whatnot. Now they're finished, they can do the majority of the conversing. And maybe after 3 people get finished, or 3 or 4, or let's say 2/3 of the people are finished eating. Then the 2/3 who are finished might go over to the living room. And if the living room's connected, they don't have to go very far. And whoever's on dish duty can easily be able to bring dishes to the kitchen because it's right next to it. But that living room being there allows for the people who are done eating to sit in a more relaxed environment, so they're not all sitting up straight at the table. Some of them are going in, sitting down, relaxing. I can say right now, almost every couch I've sat upon is more comfortable than a dining room chair. Almost every one of them. Unless it has a spring poke in me, I think it's more comfortable. But there is that detail of having everything conveniently located next to one another. You don't think about it until it's not there. So going back to the Therme Vals, it was very carefully designed. And to give it more of a natural feel, along that way, there's no technology. There's no visible technology that's staring you right in the face. So in a lot of scenarios, you'll see one piece of tech or another. Maybe you'll see a screen if you go to your local gym. Maybe you'll see a screen over there next to where the entrance is to the sauna. Maybe you'll go and you'll see painted walls, brightly colored to try and get you energized. But in this particular case, it has a more relaxing feel to it to really give you the focus on it's timeless. It's focused on giving you that timeless feature. I can't go on enough about how well everything's laid out, how you have the thermal baths and the lounges all carefully placed together. Everything works with one another, and it's basically taking you around. When you first enter in, you have one spot, then you go through the changing and the showers to make sure you're not going to go and straight away contaminate the thermal bath, because it's for most of the thermal baths they use a special combination of things to really give you the relaxation. So it's not just a gigantic thing of chlorine and water like would be in your swimming pool. It's much more relaxing. I know I personally do not enjoy the traditional pool smell, and think using different features about that, they're able to get rid of it. I haven't been there, so I don't know how it smells, but I am sure it's able to do it. It doesn't smell like a pool at the YMCA, because right away that doesn't give you the relaxing feel. It doesn't make you feel like you could sit there all day and forget about all of your cares and worries. No, that's not what the pool smell does. And even though all of the areas in it are sort of separated, you may have areas that are adjacent, but it's not an open whole open concept, so that if you're sitting in the main thermal bath, you can see over to the person sitting in the cold bath, or the person sitting in the hot bath. No. If you're in the thermal bath, you're completely immersed in it. It's not very far to go over to the other bathing areas, but you're not being forced to really look at it, or to say, oh, maybe I can go over there. No, you're in that area until you are done with that particular area, until you feel very relaxed and you're ready for your next step. And despite the fact that it's newer than the hotel that it's attached to, it's designed both to look older and to look newer than the hotel. So the hotel is actually about 20 years older than the Therme Vals. But with the cave-like feel, looking around it, you have the feeling that it's been sitting there. It's just been sitting, waiting. The hotel's built around it, not the other way around. And I'm not saying it doesn't look modern, that it looks old, but I'm rather saying it looks modern in the sense that they're modern, but at the same time, like it belongs there and it's been sitting there. It feels natural, relaxing. With the layering, it just looks like it was carved out. And something about it really gives you it really gives you the feeling of, I could sit here all day. Could really sit here all day and just enjoy it. I mean, I would not have an issue sitting in the primary thermal bath there and just sitting back, relaxing, probably with my eyes closed for a good portion of the time. But also, I could just stare at one particular spot and take it all in. Right? I have a painted wall next to me. I can stare at that for about 20 seconds before it really starts to get boring. Like, oh, I can look at it, but nothing special. And that the layered quartzite there just doesn't have that effect. I could sit there for days on end just looking at it and enjoying every little bit that it has to offer. Because doing that is just, it's so organic, so natural feeling. It really puts you at a loss for words. Because at that point your brain doesn't want to think, oh, what are the words I could use to describe this? No. When you're there, your brain just goes and says, I'm done for the moment. I'm going to sit here, I'm going to do nothing, and I'm going to be happy about it. And I know after some stressful days I could really use something like like those thermal baths. I think it would be very nice. I know yesterday was particularly stressful, but I didn't have a thermal bath to go to afterwards to sort of let everything go. And by the time I finished everything I was working on, it was very late. But still, just not having to worry about it, or having a spot where I could go and I could forget everything. An area where you don't really have to care. You don't have a care in the world. All you have is you and the bath and relaxation. That's all that ends up mattering in that spot. And so for me, that was that thermal bath really stood out. That I know there are times, especially with all of the COVID restrictions that are still in place, it's very hard to relax. But having a place like that would make life a lot easier. You sit back, you don't think about what was on the news, you don't think about what you have to do tomorrow, you don't think about any of that, or the bills you have to pay, or your upcoming performance review. None of that. All you're sitting there doing is focusing on relaxation. So you're focusing on not focusing. Now, really hard to sort of change subjects after that. But the Therme Vals have not been the only thing on my mind. And despite the fact that I've dreamed about sitting in the thermal bath just relaxing, that's not the only thing I've been dreaming about. I'm dreaming also about the ability to have a decent graphics card. Every single time I've wanted to build a computer has coincided with a Bitcoin boom. Everyone decides that they have to mine at that particular time just because. And I can get why people might like to do it. I could see myself possibly wanting to do it, but I also see a huge downside to it. And that the downside right now is that we are already in a chip shortage, a global chip shortage that is now affecting car manufacturers. We're in we're in a point where that isn't really where it isn't really easy to get your hands on the supplies you need to make a chip. And because of that and the mining boom, now you have a really strong graphics card shortage. I'm not looking to get the top of the line, top tier, this out of the next thing. I'm looking to get something that will handle a little bit more strongly of the stuff I need to do. Being in architecture and technology, I need to push. I end up needing to push computers to their limits a lot of times. So between, trying to think here, but between the last year and this year, I was fortunate to get together all of the different parts that were needed to build the computer except for a graphics card. So right now I'm using a rather old graphics card that works. It's able to do some things, but it does have its limitations. And it's not exactly a desirable position to be in, but it gives me a little bit of time to save and whatnot and work towards getting that graphics card. But right now, I am stuck. I am still staring at a much older one, and for reference's sake, I'll say this: the playing as being interested in architecture, one of the people who still has Minecraft installed on his computer. That graphics card is able to get when it's running well, is able to get about 60 frames per second on it. If I'm asking it to do a little bit more, that may drop. I've seen, depending on what I was doing in the game, I've seen it go down to 30 frames per second, which most people can't really stand. Having been accustomed to doing it on a laptop for the last year, I was lucky if I saw 30 frames per second. Right now, I'm very blessed to be seeing 60 frames per second, but at the same time, it's still not where it could be. And there are a lot of other people who wait to take the leap to get a graphics card because you don't want to. If you know something nice and new is coming around the corner, you don't necessarily want to go. You don't want to go today and get what's the latest and greatest. Then 5 days later, you find out, oh, that's no longer the latest and greatest. This is the latest and greatest. And oh, the thing that you got has just dropped down by about 50% in price. Nah, you do not want that. And the recent launches of the NVIDIA 3000 series graphics cards were rather strange. It was done in the middle of COVID, so a lot of people were on their computers and using them. But at the same time, a lot of people wanted the cards. You had lines, people staying out for a week to get their hands on the cards. Just to give you an idea of how wanted they were by a sort of community of gamers. So, with the mining sector sort of picking back up, which will inevitably be another fad. So you'll have a boom for a little while, and then once things start dropping, then people are going to start wanting to offload those cards and try and make as much money as they can. Because they said, oh, I'll purchase this card, get myself some Bitcoin, and have a good day. But that doesn't end up, it doesn't work out 100% that way. It doesn't stay that way forever. It's not an eternal source of revenue. Now, I'm not saying I know where Bitcoin's headed. I'm not saying what to do and what not to do. But the mining part of it, they trying to get hands on graphics cards to make this and make get your hands on 20 of them to make your to drastically increase the amount of Bitcoin you can get. That's where I start saying, okay, start thinking about other people. We're in a point where everyone has heavy reliance on their technology. Everyone is in a spot of needing certain technology, and if you want to encourage people to stay home and try and not gather publicly, you have to have good reasons to do that. So I know if you have something fun to do, I was on room quarantine for a good 4 weeks. If I have something fun to do, I might not worry about it. If I can sit down, have some fun, play a game or two, get work done, it's just a peachy day. But if I didn't have that capability, I probably would have lost my mind in week 2. I would have run out of things that were fun to do. Sure, there's a lot of different things I can do, but eventually one game starts getting boring, you want to switch to another. Or if you don't have something that can do games, then life really starts getting boring. And this is just, right now it's a time when people should be thinking about how other people are doing. We're in a point where a lot of people are having mental health issues because of the lockdowns and whatnot. And everyone needs a way of, as I was saying before about the Therme Vals, everyone needs a way to relax. Everyone needs a spot to relax, and we can't all just hop on a plane and go to Switzerland. Right? We can't just go and say, or find a thermal bath and do it, because right now with all the restrictions in place, you want to relax someplace, it either has to be in your personal area. So whatever's in your house or your backyard or your apartment, that's your area to relax without a mask. You can't just go down the street and sit and find a spot to sit and relax. You'd have to, without having a mask on, for following mandates and just making sure that you're acting in a safe way towards everyone else. And without getting into all of the COVID restrictions, the backlash, the frustration that everyone's going through, everyone is getting, fuses are getting shorter. I can say that straight away. But at this point, we do have to take into account that some, when compromises need to be made, and when we need to put aside some things that we want for the sake of more people being able to get what they want. And I'm not saying, everyone should go and people should only go and be getting a graphics card if you really want to use it for playing latest games. No. I'm saying while it's not an easy thing to get your hands on, don't try and get your hands on 20 of them. All right? There are people who are trying to get their hands on as many as possible, and that's just frustrating people who just want one. All right? For the Bitcoin Fed, don't worry about don't try and get the latest, the greatest, just to be able to try and earn an extra buck or two. A lot of people ended up not making out as well the last time, and I'm sure that's going to happen again. People are going to try and cut their losses when the mining boom goes down. When the mining boom is all done, people are just going to you're going to see on eBay, on Craigslist, on Amazon, you're going to see a ton of used graphics cards. And you're going to see them there because people are trying to cut their losses. They found out at that point the reason that they got the cards is no longer working out, so they want to get as much money as they can for the cards to be able to try and, if they haven't, they want to try and break even, and if they have broken even, they just want to get a little bit of extra money. And NVIDIA's response with a dedicated mining card may seem like a nice idea on the surface. There are a lot of things that seem nice on the surface, and this is one of them. Realistically speaking, it ends up being a single-use card. It's for a mining boom. It's for a fad. It's a graphics card taking up good silicon, good resources, rare earth metals, which are needed for computing. And it's limiting it to one particular use. Those mining cards don't have outputs on them. So if you're not mining, the thing essentially becomes it becomes a brick that you can hold after the mining boom goes down. And with the regular graphics cards, at least when the fad goes down, you'll have a whole ton of used cards. And for some people, that may end up working out very well because you'll have a card that's not as expensive as it would have been brand new you can get your hands on. You have a decent card, and you're not paying a whole bucket of money for it. Because it's designing something, a computer component, for not that much use. Even with Apple releasing iPhones every single year. Yeah, and if you upgrade every year, does it make sense? Not necessarily. But when you make the used phones available, then someone can get a later generation without having to spend a newer generation without having to spend as much money. So maybe someone who's sitting on right now working with the iPhone 6 will be able to get a used iPhone 11 for a decent price. And there are people who would still be willing to pick up that used iPhone 6. But in any way, once one person is done using that, let's say someone upgrades every year, when they're done using that phone, they can pass it on. It doesn't become it's not just a brick unless something really bad happened to it. It has more life in it. But these mining cards, they won't. Maybe some people will be able to put it aside, but I doubt people are going to say, okay, next mining boom, I'll have this ready to go. Instead, what I think is going to happen is a lot of them are just going to get discarded. And probably not in the proper channels of trying to recycle as much of the rare earth materials that are in there as possible. Even so, that's a tricky enough process on its own. And with with very important resources, having something that's designed basically to be used once and then end up in a landfill, that I can't really stand behind that. Going back to the global chip shortage, you're going after they're supposedly using the other areas of the silicon that aren't as good for gaming graphics, but I don't think that's really going to do it. I don't think that's going to be as helpful as need be for this scenario. Right? It may be using the fragments that theoretically couldn't have been used before, but it couldn't have been used elsewise. But that's not. But eventually, I'm sure if demand increases, they'll be making it from otherwise perfectly good silicon. And the other move of limiting the 3060 on the hash rate, it said, oh, it's unhackable. It's a driver update. It is a software limit. And it's only for that one card, not for the other ones. It's just for that one card. And I don't think it's going to do much, because you make sure the driver doesn't update and you're golden. Second, it is software, so I'm sure someone will be able to figure out a way to work around it. A way to go and override that strain or that restriction. And eventually, by doing so, they'll make it not really worthwhile. The whole limiting piece will, I think, all this is just a PR stunt. It's to get people to say, oh, look at what they're doing for the people who are for trying to take care of gamers. No. Not taking care of the gamers, not taking care of the people who want to do CAD and game. It's just focused on it's just focused on trying to keep their shareholders happy. And last I found out that power supplies are now starting to be in a bit of a shortage as well, because of the increased mining demand. Unfortunately, graphics cards don't run on magical rainbows. I wish my computer could run on magical rainbows, then when the power goes out, I'd be absolutely fine. The computer would still be working. I could just sit back and enjoy watching my Yule log while I'm eating my milk and cookies. No, they need power to work. So, with the graphics card starting to get eaten up, power supplies are starting to get hit. So, you have the fact that shipping costs in the age of COVID have increased. You have the mining boom. So, what you have are, instead of having to pay, let's say, I can't remember the exact measures of it, but instead of having to pay $3 per power supply to ship, they have to pay $10 per power supply. That means someone has to pay that extra cost, because if profits are already tight, you don't want to have your profits really take a hit. So you have these things that are called, at least in the marketing industry, shortage premiums. And forgive me, I don't think I'm using the right department. It wouldn't be a marketing piece. But it always sounds nicer to call something a shortage premium than a price hike. In reality, a shortage premium is they are the same thing I can I can see why both would be, why you'd call them both, but it's all supply and demand. If supply is high and demand is low, obviously price goes down to try and increase the demand. But in this case, supply is lower than demand is, which means there's an extra opportunity to say, okay, who really wants it? We're having trouble getting all these resources together, so we're raising costs on the end user. And that's been quite a common theme. Yeah, I've had people trying to rip you off for hand sanitizer, for masks, for toilet paper. Still don't understand the toilet paper. Yeesh, it's almost like everyone is thinking, okay, we'll make people mummies in the backyard. I could see stocking up on canned foods, but not. I'm not going to go there. With the pandemic, there have been a lot of resources that have been strained, and I think it really goes as an important piece of it. Even though it is a pandemic, people get what you need. Don't get enough to last you for the next 5 years. Try and be cautious on what it is you're going for. Because if everyone buys 5 times the amount they need, and the supply chain is only able to provide people 1 time the amount they need, you're going to run into problems. And then all of a sudden, someone's run out of toilet paper and they don't know what to do. Someone wants to play games, but they don't have a graphics card to do it. Or someone's power supply decides to go on the computer they need for their job, the computer that's the backbone, and they have to pay a very high premium to be able to get a new power supply to get that computer back up and running. There are a lot of shortages running. There are a lot of different things going on, but with all luck, hopefully the mining boom will pop sooner than rather than later, so that everyone can get there. So that there's a minimal number of these dedicated mining cards made, so not as many of them end up having to go to a landfill. And with all luck, things will be done soon enough so that we can go to Switzerland and enjoy the break from all of our computers and screens by going to a place that just feels natural, no technology, take a screen break for a day, and just sit back, relax. And I think my main goal of the week, or my primary parti for this week, is just to relax. Let go of all of the things that are going on. Just relax. Count your blessings, enjoy life, and take care.